Noreen Young is an incredibly influential puppeteer, puppet builder, and producer who's been working in the business for decades. She had a hand in creating several iconic Canadian TV shows, including Hi Diddle Day and Pencil Box. She built puppets for TV shows like Today's Special and Telefrancais, and she created, produced, and puppeteered on the show Under the Umbrella Tree, which ran on the CBC and then the Disney Channel for years. Several of Noreen's puppets are housed at the Canadian Museum of History, and in 1995 she was awarded the Order of Canada, that country's highest civilian honor, for her work in children's television. I talked to Noreen Young about her career on this episode of Under the Puppet.
You're listening to Saturday Morning Media, and now back to our show.
Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Noreen Young, welcome to Under the Puppet.
Thank you very much, Grant.
I always like to start by asking, do you remember your first exposure to puppetry, the first time you saw puppets?
I do. I must have seen it before that, but I went to New York City with my family when I was like 9, and we didn't have television, and we stayed in a hotel, and the hotel room had a television, and so I watched, I stayed in the hotel room while the family went sightseeing, and watched programs I'd never seen before, like Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, and Howdy Doody, and different kids shows, and I was really, really struck by puppets, and was totally mesmerized by them. And while we were there, we did discover a store which sold marionettes, and my parents very kindly bought me a puppet which we took back to Ottawa. I think that's pretty much the first time that I got turned on by puppets, and after that I scoured the bookshelves of our local library and read all the books I could get my hands on, and from there it was I sort of just took off. But that was sort of roundabout when I was 7 or 9, and I had a really good teacher in our public school, and who taught what they called auditorium, but really was a kind of dramatic arts show class, and he encouraged me a lot, and I used that puppet that we bought in New York, and got to be quite good operating it on my desktop.
Do you still have that puppet today?
No.
No.
No. But I could really make it dance. It was a marionette, which I didn't really ever connect with at all, really, after that one startup puppet.
But that was your gateway puppet into
pretty
the
much
world of puppetry.
Yeah. So it's all thanks to Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, and some American kids shows at that time in a hotel room in New York City. Oh, and there was a father that had made a beautiful set of carved puppets of Pinocchio, and given it to this teacher, this drama arts teacher. And for some reason, I ended up with a couple of them. I didn't steal them, but I had them when the class was finished. And I just really, really, really related to puppetry for some reason. And there you go. That's my most vivid. And then I got into building them and making my own, and doing little shows in windows of stores in my neighborhood, and making money for the Humane Society, and making my brothers get involved as well. I was always bossing friends around and my brothers to get them involved in these puppet shows.
Well, that's interesting that you say about the, doing puppet shows in store windows and stuff, because, you got your first television job by kind of knocking on doors and stuff like that. Were you just kind of this little go-getter from the very beginning of like, I'm going to do a show. Let me do a show in your place.
Yeah. I have a garage, or I have a barn.
Yeah.
I think I was pretty aggressive when it came to puppets and pushing people around to do what I wanted them to do. But I did visit a number of television producers in Ottawa, where I grew up, and sort of was persistent enough with my little basket of puppets and to get on their shows. And there was a particular producer who was doing an adult show, and I got on his show to start with, and his name was Patrick Watson, and he and Laurier Lapierre were the two producers who came up with This Hour Has 22, no, not 22, but has 7 days. That was the first one, This Hour Has 7 days. And I got on their show. But yes, I was a little bit aggressive and sort of pushy. I'm not that way anymore, of course. I'm very gentle.
Well, you also got into art at an early age too, right?
Well, I always liked to do art. I think it was just part of me. And, but I liked puppetry very much because it embraced so many different skills, and it was like miniature theater. And I liked 3D and being able to model and build characters, and it appealed to me a lot. It seemed to really, really suit me. And I also liked drama a lot, and liked to perform. And this was a way to do voicing and presentation, and not have to have a huge cast in the wings waiting to work with me.
Now, I know you have two brothers, and your younger brother, Stephen, became a puppeteer as well. Did you grow up in a creative household? Was your house very creative?
Not overtly, but my father kind of liked to perform, and he was quite a character. And my mother was artistic, like she liked to draw and paint, but they weren't professional artists. You know, my father worked in an insurance company, and my mother was a homemaker. But my two brothers and I were always in our work life. We were always self-employed. We never worked for anybody. We were always independent business people, and we started our own jobs and work. And my brother John was a cabinet maker and was really, really wonderful with working with wood. And my brother Stephen is now a developer of heritage real estate, but he was a puppeteer for a long time. And he was younger than I, and I was able to boss him around and get him to do puppet stuff with me. Whereas my brother John, who was just 3 years younger than I, he told me to, well, we're not supposed to use words like that, but he told me not to pursue that idea.
But it seems like with, you saying your parents bought you that puppet, it seems like your parents were at least supportive of your creative pursuits.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they were, and especially my mother. She was behind us all the way, and she was an extraordinarily supportive mother, and never signed us up for anything. We didn't have to go. I didn't have to go to ballet class or do anything that I didn't particularly want to, and she just kind of followed along and supported us every step of the way, as I say.
When you were first making puppets, what resources were you using to figure out how to make them, or were you just figuring it out on your own?
Well, I figured a lot of it out on my own, but I did read all the books I could lay my hands on in the public library, and learned that way, and just kind of cranked them out a lot. And I like to spend time in my art table building stuff, and so that I figured out a lot of stuff on my own. And there is a type of puppets that I'm sort of known for, and that is for the sculpted puppet, which is cast with liquid latex. And so the faces are very mobile and the mouths move and the nose wiggles and the eyes can pop in and out and everything. And I perfected that technique. And I don't know of anybody else who does it quite as much as I do, but it seemed to suit me a lot. I like to sculpt, and I just like the whole technique, and that I was kind of stuck with it. I've tried different other techniques, but that's the one that I really like.
Did you ever take any performance or acting classes when you were starting out?
Not really. I like to put on plays, and I like to do stuff. I belong to the youth group at our church, and was always involved in those presentations. And there was an art store near us, and the guy that owned it would let me do shows in his window, and we would make money for the Humane Society, and I would bully my brother John into helping me and a couple of friends, and we would do shows in this chap's store window.
Now, I know you went to the Ontario College of Art,
Yes.
But were you also performing during this time too? Like, were you doing theater or any sort of performance like that?
I did a little bit of theater when I was at art college, and I had done a little bit at our church before I went to art college, and but no, not too much. And at the time I was in art school, puppetry was kind of wimpy and not that cool, and it really wasn't until I left art college and and was married that I realized that puppetry was my calling in a way, because it just suited me so much, and I loved doing it so much that I was very aggressive in searching work down in Ottawa, and I particularly liked television, and I don't know, it just the medium itself, and also because you worked as a team. Television is very much a team sport, and I liked working with set designers and costume designers, and it that appealed to me a lot.
I did want to talk about your first TV show, which, as we mentioned earlier, you got by taking a basket of your puppets around to TV stations and asking if you could do a show.
Yes. Yes, this was. Well, I'm getting old. I'm old. I think I hate to admit it, but I am. So this was the '60s, and that's when I was cracking the TV market, and I lived in Ottawa, which is a city that's not as big as Toronto or Montreal, and it's very it's a government town, and it's sort of, people think that it's boring. It's not now, but it was a little bit, I guess, at the time. But so that there were, I don't know, TV was programming was really just starting at that time, and there were a lot of opportunities. There were so many more opportunities then than there are now, and because now the competition is so awesome and horrendous in a way, and but then there were all kinds of opportunities, and if you got really pushy and aggressive, then you could find work, or you could make your own work. And I used to go and pursue these particular producers at CBC Ottawa, and with my little basket of puppets, and tell them that I could do the puppets on their show, or I could think up shows, or I could do something. And finally, they just kind of got sick of me and told me to go away and come back with a show idea, which I did. And so the first show I did was in 1967, and it went for 10 years and at CBC Ottawa, and I made all the puppets, and another puppeteer, Bob Dermer, who is a puppeteer that comes out of Toronto and Ottawa, and he and I did 6 puppet characters together. He did 3 and I did 3.
And what was the name of that show?
That was called High Diddle Day.
High Diddle Day, yeah.
1967 to 76.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of kind of people talk about it online when I was researching for this interview, but there's no clips anywhere. Like, I haven't been able to see any clips of it.
No.
So what was the show about?
Well, it was about a woman mayor of a little town called Crabgrass, and her name was Gertrude Diddle. And she was a pretty outre sort of character, and she had a real cleavage. I made a torso for her, and I'm surprised that she was acceptable at the time. But she ended up by being I gifted it to my friend Ronnie Burkett. I think you've probably talked to Ronnie, and he has Mrs. Diddle in his studio under glass, and he says that she was his inspiration, just like my New York hotel room and the TV. That was my inspiration. So,
how does that? I was going to ask you this later on because I was gonna bring up Ronnie, but what's it like to have somebody come up and say that to you, like that this character that you created is an inspiration and you know the reason that they're doing what they're doing?
Well, it's a wonderful thing, and he actually wrote me a letter when he was 12 years old, and I was doing High Diddle Day, and he wrote and he asked how I made my puppets and would I share some puppet making secrets with him, and I wrote back, and I started the letter off by Dear Ronald. I didn't know that he was Ronnie at the time. But we struck up a friendship that started when he was 12 years old. And I was a young puppeteer working in Ottawa, CBC Ottawa. And he did admit later that he'd written a similar letter to many puppeteers, and I was the only one that answered. So we're friends to this day. And he's wonderful and very supportive and calls me Nor.
Well, he was very excited. He had posted, I think, on Instagram, like, why hasn't anybody interviewed Noreen yet? Everyone has to. And so I said, because I'd interviewed Nina Keogh,
Yeah.
and she had mentioned you. And I said, oh, I'm getting in touch with you. He's like, okay, good, because it needs to be done. I was like, oh, okay, great. So you can partially blame him for me want to keep harping you to come on the show here.
Yeah. Well, I've known him for so many years, and when he was 19, I think, or 19, he was going to go to Russia to a puppet festival. And at the time he lived in Alberta, and he came through Ottawa to go to Russia, and he stayed at my place at that time when I think he was 19. And then he did well. We just kept in touch all the years, and he called me the other day just to see how I was doing in the pandemic, and hey Nora, how are you doing? I was just thinking of you, and it's nice. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, he is. I would like to ask about High Diddle Day. Was it a daily show or a weekly show? And how many episodes and stuff did you do?
Well, we did one a week, and it stopped for the summer, but it went, I don't know, it started in September and ended in June or May, and but it went for 10 years. And at the end of it, I went into the program director's office at the CBC Ottawa and said, okay, that's enough. I've had enough of doing that show. I'd like to do another one. And he said, well, Noreen, people don't usually go from one show to the next just on a whim. and, but he let me do that. And we segued into a show called Pencil Box, which was... it went for 3 years, and it won an ACTRA Best Children's Award.
It's snowing. I'll soon be able to go tobogganing.
No, you won't. Remember the dragon.
Oh, yes. It's not fair the way he melts all the snow with his fiery breath.
I'm going to try to get rid of that dragon for you.
And then we did, but it was canceled because it had a great flaw, that particular show. And the flaw was that children, as sweet and as wonderful as they are and as imaginative, they plagiarize. And we discovered that a couple of kids had sent in stories that were obviously ones that they had read in a book somewhere, and we would be in great danger of being sued if somebody discovered that. And so they called an end to that show after 3 years. And I was out in my ear from CBC Ottawa, and I was an independent producer for 7 years on my own, doing a lot of educational stuff.
Yeah.
With puppets. Everything I do is with puppets.
Some of the puppets from Pencil Box are actually in the museum, right?
Yeah, there's some puppets there, and there's some puppets also from TV Ontario, because I did a lot of work with TV Ontario in the 70s and 80s, and did Readalong, which was a very well-known and long series helping kids learn how to read, and Telefrancais, which was a English as a second language program, and the Museum of History was gifted with a number of my puppets by TV Ontario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to make you feel proud, though, that they're
Yeah.
being preserved in that way.
Yeah, and they are very well looked after, except that they spend most of their life on a shelf in a storage room because they can only bring them out now and again because of space. However, there's going to be a big exhibit in 2022 of Canadian children's television programs, and there'll be a lot of those puppets out for viewing, and some of the puppets from High Diddle Day, and also Under the Umbrella Tree.
You got to tell Ronnie he's got to give his puppet up for a little bit too.
Yeah, that's right.
I wanted to ask maybe even a similar question to what Ronnie Burkett asked when he wrote you, but a lot of your puppets have sculpted faces with liquid rubber and stuff. Did you have a mentor that you learned that from, or did you just kind of figure it out on your own? And how did you come up with that process?
Well, I figured it out on my own pretty much. My husband, Brig, at the time, suggested it. He was very supportive, and it was kind of his idea to start with. And I did this little Mexican guy and out of rubber, and the mouth moved, and I was so excited when I could see that the mouth moved, and the possibilities were amazing and endless. And I just made that technique my own because nobody else seemed to be too trusting of the rubber. They didn't think that it lasted that long. But I have puppets that are 60 some years old, and they're fine. Like the rubber is still intact and everything is strong. And I like to sculpt, and that's a very, that's a sculpting technique. And it just suited my style, I think. And I just finished building a dragon for a customer, and I did that same sculpting and casting and pouring of rubber. And I have made puppets a lot out of foam, but gets to be kind of a Muppet type puppet, and that wasn't a style that was mine. But I certainly admire it. But I like to sculpt.
You built puppets for today's special, including Sam the Night Watchman and Muffy Mouse.
Yeah.
When you were creating for a show like today's special, did the producers give you designs to work on, or were you able to just create the puppets?
Well, I never was given designs, but I was given pretty helpful characteristics of the characters that they wanted. So with Sam and Muffy, there was quite a leadership role played by the director-producer in that show. With the High Diddle Day, those were all my puppets that I built, and we just used them. And with Under the Umbrella Tree, I designed those characters, but it was sort of a mix, you know. And then I did the Noddy Shop. I did a whole bunch of puppets for BBC USA, and the director of that, Ken Sigelq, was very specific about what he wanted. But I'm never given a design. That doesn't happen very often. I'm actually doing a puppet right now that it's a dragon, and it's built based on illustrations from a book. So that's one where I'm not doing the design at all, and I don't have any claim to the character, but it's been an interesting exercise to do it from somebody else's work.
Well, and kind of related to that, I wanted to ask, you did a show called What's New, where you built puppets of actual political figures and people.
Yeah.
What are the challenges of building a puppet that has to look like somebody, so when he comes on the screen, people know who it is?
Well, it's not easy to do a likeness, but I found that I had the knack to do it. I could do it, and I used to get scared that my facility of being able to do these likenesses would disappear sometime, and I wouldn't be able to do it anymore, because I actually kind of channeled photographs of the people that I was building, and tried not to think about it too much, because the more I thought about it and how I could do this, the less I could do it. So I just sort of let myself be a channel, and I've done a lot of politicians that way, but I also have done a lot of commissions, and people have come to me and asked me to do the same for them as I've done with politicians. And a couple of years ago, I mounted an exhibition in my town of Almont, where I pulled together 50 of these puppets, like of townspeople, and we put them together in one of the segments, or one of the parts of the exhibition. And so I just finished doing one of our new mayor in town. And so I do the famous and the infamous.
Well, and I think you said when we were talking about this earlier that like really classically beautiful people are a little harder to do.
Yeah. They are. Like, it's very hard to do a very beautiful woman, a classically beautiful woman, or a handsome man. Whereas somebody that has a kind of quirky face, or a big nose, or funny little eyes, or big ears, it's a lot easier, because you could hang the design on this facial flaw. But it turns out they make more interesting puppets. And so when people ask me to do these puppets on commission, I would say, well, could you please send me a photograph of what this person looks like? Because if they're really good looking, I won't be able to do them. And would you like to do one of my granddaughter? You know, she's 3 years old. And I said, no, please, I can't do kids, because their faces haven't developed yet. You know, like they all look the same. Anyway, it's been fun. I like doing look-alike puppets.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it would not be possible to do one because I'm kidding.
You're way too handsome.
Yes. I wanted to ask about Telefrancais because I actually watched this show in high school in our French class. And
where did you go to school?
Well, in California, in the United States. But our French teacher would show it.
Wow.
And I totally forgot about it until I saw the theme song when I was looking it up to do research for this show. And I assume because you played a character on the show that you also speak French fluently.
I never did any voicing with TV Ontario.
Oh, okay.
No, we always worked to pre-recorded tracks.
Okay.
And those characters were done by people that could really speak French. I can speak a little bit, but not enough to do a good show.
Yeah.
But for what's new, the tracks were pre-recorded, and we synced up the puppet mouth movement to the voicing. But with under the umbrella tree, that was live voicing, and I did Gloria, and
right.
Some of the other characters too. It was a fun show to do.
Well, let's talk about Under the Umbrella Tree. Where did that idea come from? Because you created that show.
Yeah, that was my show. With CBC and Telefilm Canada, the three owners of the product, and it was my idea along with writer Ken Sobel and my friend Julie Voyer again, and we came up with the idea of these three puppet characters who lived in an apartment with a human character, and it was really 15-minute shows for kids about how to cope in the world, and everything from sharing to being bossy or being rough, or getting new shoes, or I don't know. It was all about all kinds of stuff. We even did one on dying. Their little goldfish died, so they had a whole show about putting together a little funeral for this fish, and it turned out to be one of our best shows, actually, and very funny. It's surprising, but it was. So, but yeah, I ended up owning the copyright of that show, so I'm the owner of it. And,
I was going to ask about that because I heard you say that in an interview that you own the copyright, and I've heard so many stories, especially out here in Southern California, of creators who create something and then the rights are just taken away by the studio. Was that something you fought for in your contract, or was that something that just happened?
It sort of happened, and I had a very good agent at the time, or a distributor, and she sold the series to the Disney Channel, and also to the French channel in Canada. That it was translated into French as well, and I don't know. I paid off quite a lot of money to the investors, and I ended up owning the ownership because also Ken Sobel passed away, and anyway, I'm not sure how it happened, to tell you the truth, but I ended up with the copyright. Yeah, but it's hard to sell kids shows when they become vintage in a way, and Under the Umbrella Tree is now streamed on Encore Plus, which is the CBC Canada Media Fund outlet, and it's watched a lot, but the royalties are really not too rich.
Well, it's still out there though. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted. I didn't want it to be forgotten, and so a lot of people, like the recognition of the characters is quite stunning at most of the time, and there is a demographic too which relates to the show a lot, and usually they're young adults who are like late 20s to mid 30s. And they get all excited when they hear Gloria talk or they see Iggy.
I heard that you said that show took a long time to get to the screen. Like you were pitching it for like 7 years or something.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. As a creator, how do you not get discouraged when it takes so long?
Well, you do other things, and don't forget I had stopped High Diddle Day and gone on to Pencil Box for 3 years, and then I got kicked out of the CBC for 7 years. And during those 7 years, I was an independent producer doing shows about drug education and hazardous symbols, product symbols, and all kinds of stuff, and sex education. And at the same time, I was pushing Under the Umbrella Tree and wherever I could. And I only found out when it was going to be aired when I was at a cocktail party in Toronto one time, and I happened to be talking to Dodie Robb, who was the head of children's at the time. And she said something like, oh, yes, well, we're going to do that in the fall when Under the Umbrella Tree starts. And I said, what? And that's how I found out that she had planned to do a pilot of the show and to make it the next program. And we took over the spot that the Friendly Giant had, because the Friendly Giant show went for about 30 some years, and the CBC decided that they were going to try a few other things, and we were it for the first show, and for a while there we were called the Giant Killers. But I think they forgave us, and Mr. The Friendly Giant had quite a good run.
Yeah.
The 30 years is a long time.
Yeah. Well, you created Under the Umbrella Tree, you produced it, you performed on the show. How did you balance all that stuff while the show was being made?
Well, I didn't do anything else. My family life was not I spent a lot of my focus on that show, I have to say. But it was a wonderful show to do, and I loved every minute of it. And I was also the script story editor, because I felt I was sort of the keeper of the concept, and I would go over all the scripts and edit them, and I don't know, I had a lot of energy. I still do. I still do.
Yeah. Well, the characters from Under the Umbrella Tree recently got back together to make a little video about wearing your mask and
that's
for the
right.
pandemic.
Yeah, that was so good, and that was an idea of Travis and Ryan Gordon, two cousins who wanted to do something, and they really liked the show. So Travis, who used to teach at Algonquin College, which is in their video department, and his subject was background keying and replacing the background. He did an amazing job of looking at and taking taking Umbrella Tree shows and using the backgrounds from those shows to create the background for this new tape that we did just a year ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was like a miracle. I don't how he did it is quite something.
You look like you're dressed to handle plutonium.
I need it to keep the virus away. I don't want to get sick.
Well, I think you went a little overboard.
I think you went a lot overboard.
Anyways, I'm glad that you're here. I'd like to talk about Holly.
Oh, Holly. Gosh, I miss her.
Yeah.
Me too. Well, anyways, the good news is she only has 11 days left in her self-quarantine.
Oh, great, good for her. That's our girl.
Yeah.
What's a quarantine?
Yeah, what's a quarantine?
And the music too. He took bits of music from the background of the actual show and series. He did a fabulous job, and it was so nice to get back together and to get Holly, to agree to come and do it with us, and we all had such a nice time being together for a period of a couple of days, and it was lovely.
And your brother worked on that show too, right?
Yeah, Stephen. He did Jacob the Blue Jay.
Yeah. So what was it like working for that long with your brother? Did you guys get along okay?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, no, we usually find each other very amusing. We make each other laugh a lot, and sometimes he'd play the brother card, which was a little bit hard to do. But he's fun, and Iggy the iguana is done by Bob Stutt, who's a great friend, and he did such a wonderful job with that character. And he and his wife ended up running a bulk barn for about 10 years, and after the show ended, but he does some writing and puppeteering, and I always drag him down to the town where I live to get involved in different projects, and he always says yes. He's so great. And I get my brother Stephen to help me with things in town as well. So
it's good to have those people you can wrangle into your ideas.
Yeah.
Well, in 1995, you received the Order of Canada, which is the highest civilian honor. Did you ever think that your puppetry would lead to receiving the Order of Canada?
No. No, when the letter arrived to tell me that I'd been given this wonderful award, I think my husband and I cried. We read the letter and we cried, and it was like so wonderful and so moving and such a huge honor. And everybody that I know who's ever had one of those Order of Canada awards always says that they say that you spend the rest of your life trying to earn it, because you really don't think you really are quite overwhelmed that you got it. It was great.
Well, it's for anyone listening who doesn't know, it's sort of like the Presidential Medal of Freedom here in the United States. So it's a big deal. Are there any other puppeteers who have received it?
Ronnie Burkett.
Oh, Ronnie has. Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah.
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 Oh, amazing.
I was one of the people that suggested him, and they have to kind of gather a portfolio of people who have nominated you before they'll consider you, and then but I think he even became an officer of the Order of Canada. I think he's up to my status a little bit. Darn him.
You received in 1996 also an UNIMA citation for Under the Umbrella Tree.
Yeah.
Are you involved in like UNIMA and puppetry guilds, the different organizations for puppetry?
Not really. No, I have been sort of involved a little bit over the years, but no, I have friends that do a magnificent job of running puppetry groups and run festivals. I did a puppet festival in Almont, my hometown, for 12 years, and it's a big job to do that. And but it was great for me, and it was great for a lot of puppet groups that I knew who came and performed, and it was good for our town. Even now, people think nostalgically of it, and it ended in 2016 after 12 years. So
yes, it was the Puppets Up International Festival, and as you said, it ran for 12 years, and you were the artistic director. What did you learn about puppetry and different styles of puppetry from being the artistic director for that festival?
Well, for me, it was a huge learning curve because I had a career in television. And this was all about theater and puppetry for theater. And it's different. And I had a great deal of respect for groups that came and performed and managed to make a career and a living from it and travel the world. And we had groups from Hungary and Russia and France and all over the place, and they were wonderful, and also it was about organizing a live event. It was a 3-day event, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we would have 10 puppet troupes that performed out of tents and spaces in town, and people would buy a ticket and they'd be able to go to all of the shows, and it was good for the town. Like it kind of branded it a little bit, because Almont is a small town, and the population is, gosh, what like is it now, 12,000 or, but that's for Greater Almont, and but it did a lot of it did sort of cause a lot of notoriety for the town.
Did you have any favorite acts that came through the festival?
Yes, we did. At least I did. We did. Everybody loved them. It was the Frogtown Mountain Puppeteers, and they came every year, except for the year that Robin, the sister of the 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, had her baby, and so they didn't come that year. But everybody loved them, and they were so funny, and they were amazingly flexible and warm-hearted, but the puppet shows were so popular. People there were lineups.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I missed it, because I think I was, I don't know, when I was really heavily getting into puppetry and all these different things, it was towards the end of when it was running. But, I certainly heard about it, and it seemed from people I know who checked it out and were involved, people loved that festival. It was really great.
Yeah, there was a sort of wonderful atmosphere, and it was for all ages. It wasn't just for kids. It wasn't just for adults. It was for all ages, and people would be dancing in the street, because we had a lot of street entertainment and music, and it was fun. But we had to give it up, because it was just getting too scary financially, and the board of directors were personally on the line for any losses, and we actually did have a loss the last year. We just and we had to have a fundraiser at Christmas to get the money, but by that time it was just too late to start another year's festival, so we packed it in before year number 13. So
yeah. Well, you've done, Noreen, you've done a lot of work for kids and on educational television. Did you ever want to work on something where you could just let loose and do something strictly for adults, or did you work on something that was like that?
Well, I did 2 years ago. A friend of mine who's a music composer wrote an opera for adults called Sleeping Rough, and that was performed in Ottawa 2 years running, and it was there was an orchestra and 4 soloists and 4 puppeteers, and it was put on for a music group in Ottawa, and it was strictly for adults, and it was about homeless people, and it was sad. It was very sad, but I think the puppets I made for that show were some of the best puppets I've ever made in my career, and I just really kind of got into it, and it got a lot of attention the first year, particularly.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Music. It was for a series called Music and Beyond. and there is a tape of that somewhere, but it was more for a record rather than it wasn't ever broadcast.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a young builder who's just starting out?
Well, that it's going to be a lot of fun, and that you have to create your own work at this point. I think if you're going to go to see a television producer, you can't just go with a little basket of puppets. You got to go almost with a finished product. And because the competition now between channels is pretty overwhelming, and you have to hit the ground running. When I was starting out, you had a chance to learn on camera. And, I always figured that the 10 years I did High Diddle Day from 1967 to 76 was my university years of learning about television and puppetry and how to put a show together and how to roll with the punches when you were working on television and, to be able to ad lib and whatnot. But I think you have to, nowadays, you've got to be a little bit more prepared with almost a finished product or a pilot. You got to come with a pilot. Now, the pilot could be a 5-minute segment of a 15-minute show, but it still has to be something on tape. And that there's not a lot of people that are puppeteers and build puppets. They're mostly people that operate puppets, and they're excellent puppeteers for sure, but they don't build their puppets. And I think that's a useful thing to know. It's a good thing to know. And there's a lot of information out there that you can go dip into and find.
Yeah, and I know a few builders out here, and it seems to me that if you can get puppetry jobs because you build the puppet and then you get to puppeteer the puppet.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's kind of like a double thing.
Yeah. I used to be sneaky, and I would build a puppet that had a head that was just a little bit too tiny for most people's hands, but they fit my hand fine.
Yeah.
And that I'd have to be hired as the puppeteer but I don't do that anymore.
I watched an interview you did where you said that puppets are like ballet slippers, and I loved that analogy. Could you tell us that analogy for us?
Well, I mean, when you use the puppet, you've got your hand inside this container, this head, and you're working your guts out, and you are sweating like crazy, and you're moving repetitively, moving the head and the mouth and everything, and the paint flakes off when you're flexing the rubber or the foam or whatever, and it gets thrown down at the end of a scene, and it gets a little bit dirty. And by the time you've gone through a series, your puppet is in great need. Well, I used to have to repair my puppets on the weekends, or to be ready for the shows that we were going to do in the week. And so they get a beating, that's for sure. But my puppets have been very tough over the year. They've lasted very well. And I'm quite proud of that, actually, because they still need to be repaired, but
Well, one thing I know artists who are just starting out have trouble with is determining price. Like, you're going to build a puppet for someone. How much do I charge for this? What is your advice for coming up with that price to charge somebody to build a puppet?
Well, when you're building a puppet for television, the audience is going to be quite large because a lot of people will see it. And if you're going to be coming up with a design, as well as building the puppet, then your design is worth something, and the rights are worth something. So I would charge sometimes, and I was always accused of undercutting too many other puppeteers. I felt they were fair prices, but people kind of overcharged as far as I was concerned. And but for puppets for TV, $5,000 a puppet is not unusual, and that includes all the rights and building, and you kiss that puppet goodbye unless you negotiate that you've got some rights left. But if you're doing it for somebody as a commission, a private commission, like my look-alike puppets, I've been charging $1,000 per puppet for the last 15, 20 years, and I'd like to put it up a little bit, but people just can't afford a lot more than that, really. And it's going to sit on their mantelpiece, or it's going to sit in their library or whatever, and it's like buying a painting. So, and if you're making puppets to sell in a store, well, good luck. You won't get much money when it comes right down to it.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, I always like to ask, what has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
Certainly the Order of Canada honor was amazing. That was, and I didn't put it in a drawer. I used it. I used it to sell our, Puppets Up festival and to get people to invest in different projects or to commit to projects in one way or another. The Under the Umbrella Tree series was the best series for me because I had the most control over it. And what was so gratifying was that people really liked that series and enjoyed it. And I'm still getting people, saying how much they loved it and enjoyed it. And I don't know, it's been a wonderful career for me. I've had the most, and I'm still doing it. I mean, I'm building a puppet in the basement right now, and the whole thing has been great. I don't have one particular, well, just the ones I've mentioned.
That's fantastic.
And the people that I've got to meet and the puppeteers that I've worked with, and I feel that I belong to a very unique group of people, and puppeteers can be introverts in some ways, and they need the puppet to express themselves. And for me, that's been kind of true. I'm different when I do a puppet than I am when I'm just myself, and that has been a tool that I've used over the years.
Well, Noreen Young, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Well, it was a great pleasure for me, and I've enjoyed getting to know you and to tell you some stories, and thank you.
Big thanks to Noreen Young for being on the show. For links to some of the things we talked about, check out the show notes for this episode number 57, over at underthepuppet.com. And if you'd like to hear a little bit more of my talk with Noreen Young, download the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android and click on the gift icon in the listing for this episode. Special thanks to Nina Keogh for making this interview possible. And I'd like to take a moment to thank you, the incredible Under the Puppet listeners. This episode marks the start of Under the Puppet's 5th year, and I deeply appreciate that you get what I'm trying to do with this show. I want to thank you for listening and for telling your friends about the show as well. Here's to 4 incredible years behind us and many more to come. Well, now that we got all that sentimentality out of the way, it's time to announce the winner of episode 56's giveaway for a brand new puppet deck. The question was, what was the name of the theater company where Jim Napolitano performed giant 9-foot-tall body puppets? And the answer was Bits and Pieces. And the winner is Julie Scarborough. Congratulations, Julie, your puppet deck is on the way. If you missed out on winning the puppet deck this month, you can check them out over at puppetdeck.com. And if you use the promo code UNDERTHEPUPPET, that's all one word and all capital letters, at checkout, you'll get 40% off your order. Find out more at puppetdeck.com. We have a great prize for this episode, courtesy of Inform Press. A brand new copy of Out of the Shadows, the Henson Festivals and Their Impact on Contemporary Puppet Theater by Leslee Asch. Out of the Shadows is the first book to focus solely on Jim Henson's love of the field of puppetry and the creation of the Jim Henson Foundation's International Puppet Festivals. This book examines the festivals and their continued legacy, including a look at the contemporary puppet theater landscape. To be entered to win this copy of Out of the Shadows, simply answer this question from the episode you just heard. What was the name of the opera that Noreen Young built puppets for that she considers the best puppets she's ever built? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by March 15th, 2021. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and announced on the April 1st, 2021 episode of the show. One entry per household. Good luck. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604 or click on the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can also get in touch via email at underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet was edited by Steven Staver and features music by Dan Ring. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons get new episodes before they are released, behind-the-scenes information, and exclusive bonus episodes. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2020 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Pachoco executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.